Jack, what's up, man? It is Friday. We're here, college football. We're gonna do a whole preview on the college football season. Make sure we're aware of all the changes. How you been, man?
I've been good, getting excited for football season.
Yeah, so we got, just to be clear, correct me, I'm pretty sure I got this right. There's so much football going on. Next Saturday, there's three games of consequence, right? Florida State, Georgia Tech, SMU, Nevada, and then it's the following Thursday, the 29th, is basically when we get started, right? We have games that Thursday, that Friday, and then that Saturday.
Yeah, that following week is really the big kickoff. You got Clemson versus Georgia and a bunch of other really big games that week as well.
Sweet. So yeah, let's do it. What I wanted to do today is basically box you in. I'm going to put you on the spot, some rapid fire. We'll go over, there's two ways to bet. Actually, really, there's three ways to bet, right? You do future bets, you bet the old school way, just on the game, or player props if you want to put that in one category, and then there's the live betting. I think the cool part about, this time that we're in now is that you can take advantage of not doing it the old school way, right? You're not just limited to this is the spread, this is the total. So whether it's future bets or live bets, that's what I really want to explore. So we're going to obviously start with some future bets, see what you like, give us an idea of what to expect this season. And then just as a disclaimer, I know we've talked about this before, but for people just turning on their college football brain, I guess everything's changed. I think it's like 33 schools have changed their conference over the past couple of years. It's a lot. So just so we're clear, there's no more Pac-12. Well, kind of. And now I'm gonna stop. Right. So there's two teams left in the Pac-12: Washington State and Oregon State. They don't get an automatic bid. They're basically Mountain West teams. So you have the Big Ten, the Big 12, the ACC, the SEC. Whoever wins the conference championship gets the automatic bid. So you have four teams there, and then you'll have seven, I guess, wild card, teams that don't win their championship. They'll get in, leaving one spot left for a team that's not part of the Power Four: Sun Belt, American, Conference USA, MAC, those conferences. Whoever the best team out of their collective gets in, and then you get 12 teams. I get that all right?
Yeah, just about right. Yeah, if you're in the Big Four, you win your conference, you're in. And I mean, I'm pretty sure for all four of them, it's the two best teams in the conference. There's no more divisions.
Right. They'll play in the conference championship. And yeah,
Yeah,
the
you're
schedules
not
are,
going to see an Iowa that's 7-6 in the conference championship anymore.
and then
So
the schedules are all unbalanced. So not every team is playing every team. So there's a whole bunch of different things to look at. And on a week by week basis, when we're doing our picks, we'll get into that, the traveling and all the different matchups. But you've been studying this all summer. You've been trying to figure out if there's an edge, where there's value, are there teams overrated, underrated? So let's get into it. Let's start. Which conference would you like to start with?
let's do the SEC first. SEC first. That's going to be the most interesting one. Also probably odds on has the most teams get in. I mean, SEC with Florida has probably the most difficult schedule in the entire country. I think they play 5 top 15 teams in a row or something along those lines. And that's one of those teams that if they go 8-4, which I do not think they will, but if they go 8-4, they could make the playoff at 8-4 because they're going to get in over a 10-2 Big 12 team and probably a 10-2 Big 10 team as well. So that makes it really interesting. The team that I have circled is Missouri. And that's the only reason why is because their schedule is absolutely ridiculous with how easy it is. They really only play one real championship contender, and that's at Alabama on October 26th. But they can afford to lose at Texas A&M or at home against Oklahoma. They can drop 2 games. I mean, their schedule is a joke this year. And so they just have to go 10-2 to get in.
Heading to Missouri doesn't play in the SEC championship, still gets in as like the 11 or 12 team, you think?
Comfortably, yes. And I have their odds at plus 180. And we'll go over all my picks at the end here, but that is definitely one of them. I have them making the playoff pretty comfortably.
So Missouri at the worst, 10-2. Talk to me. You start off with Florida saying that, you made your point, I get you, but you don't think Florida's gonna be good enough to sneak in there.
No, but I mean, the SEC schedule is a gauntlet. That Florida is just an example because they have the hardest schedule in the country.
So
That's all.
is Georgia and Alabama, is it Penn now that not instead of pencil, is it Penn because there's 12 teams? Talk to me about those two teams.
Alabama is a lot of wait and see. I've heard grumblings from people on like Rivals and Twitter and stuff saying multiple different things about their skill position players. They need to find some depth on the defensive side of the ball. They lost a lot of guys, a new coach, obviously, and a ton of pressure on DeBoer. I mean, yeah, he has a winning history, but he's never coached at a place like Alabama.
Yeah.
And nobody has except Nick Saban. So that I'm kind of on a wait and see thing. I mean, they have a really talented roster, but new coach, I think they take a little step back this year.
Georgia, on the other hand, no reason to think they're not in the top 12.
Yeah, the easiest way to compare Georgia, for those of you that don't know college football, Georgia is Scotty Scheffler. Georgia is the guy to beat, and there would be a lot of people that would take Georgia versus the field if some of these sports books were offering that.
What makes Georgia this year so dominant? In the past 3, 4 years during this run, the defense has been fantastic. Obviously, they won with Stetson Bennett. Carson Beck, their quarterback's projected to be top 5 Heisman guy. But give me an idea of what Georgia's roster. What's going to make them so scary this year?
Yeah, so returning a bunch of offensive linemen, Tate Ratledge to be specific, phenomenal offensive linemen. I mean, you have Beck, Mike Williams, and Malachi Starks are shoe-in first rounders. Like, if they got hurt, God forbid they get hurt tomorrow, they're still getting drafted in the first round.
Where
Those
is
three
the guys?
guys are legit. Do what?
What position would you say starts?
Starks is a safety, and Mike Williams is kind of an edge guy, freak athlete, probably runs the sub 4.5, 6'3", 260, just an absolute freak. And then we picked up Travis Etienne as well. So Trevor Etienne, pardon me, from Florida transferred in, and he was one of the best backs in the SEC last year.
So So we want to box you in here to 12 teams. You got Georgia, you got Missouri. Is there a third team from the SEC?
Potentially. There's a few teams that could come out and surprise you. I know we covered this in the SEC pod a little bit ago, but teams like Oklahoma, new quarterback, Tennessee, new quarterback. If either of those guys come out and light it up, and they go 9-3, 10-2, they're in the conversation too.
And then where are
So
we at with Texas? We've done 5 minutes now and no Texas.
yeah, which is crazy. Texas has a lot of roster turnover. And so it's going to be a big point of emphasis to see if they can reload. I mean, they lost Worthy and they lost their 2 big guys up front on defense. And so they're on kind of a we need to reload here and get these guys reps as soon as possible because they lost a lot. They did not lose very much. Texas lost a good amount.
So it sounds like you're comfortable with Georgia, you're comfortable with Missouri. You want to wait on everybody else without saying which teams are going to be. Do you think it's 3, 4, or 5? How many, by the time we're finished, how many teams from the SEC will get in?
I'm going to go with 4. If I had to pencil it in right now, I think it's going to be Georgia. I think it's going to be Ole Miss. I think it's going to be Missouri, and then potentially Alabama, LSU, Oklahoma, Tennessee.
So you don't like Texas. So Texas is probably the team that you're. I mean, nationally, what's Texas like 3rd this year, right?
Yeah, Texas is 3rd. I'm there. I'd throw them in that group too. I just don't know how much confidence I have in them without that phenomenal roster they had last year.
And they also, right? They haven't played the SEC. It's different, right? Every year.
Much different. They have an extremely difficult schedule. Pretty sure they play Michigan like 2nd game of the year, first game of the year. So they have that and the whole SEC gauntlet. So I don't know. I think both Texas and Oklahoma will struggle. Oklahoma kind of, I mean, it really for both of them depends on their quarterback play.
So let's since you said Texas is playing Michigan, let's do that and go to the Big Ten. So the big dogs in the Big Ten added Oregon. So you have Michigan, you have Ohio State, you have Oregon. Those are the 3. Do all 3 get in? And Penn State, or should they be in that class, or is Penn State in the next tier with the Wisconsins and the Iowas of the world?
Yeah, Penn State's kind of their own tier, I would say.
Okay.
There's the Penn State tier. And the Big Ten is going to be very interesting this year. I think Oregon is the best team, but traveling so much, I mean, like obviously I don't think traveling is that big of a deal, but when you're doing it that much, traveling from that like northwestern corner of the US down to Iowa and out to Rutgers and all of these teams, that will take a toll eventually.
Talk to me about. I wanted to talk about Oregon for a second because their head coach Dan Lanning, right, was the defensive coordinator at Georgia. got the job because Georgia's defense was fantastic. Choked in the Washington. I mean, is there any other way to put it? Like they were double-digit favorites against Washington Friday night. I mean, everyone penciled Oregon in, right? Like
Yeah, I think they were 10-point favorites.
they just so what's up with him? I thought that was a little bit of a red flag. That their roster was so much better than Washington's last year, and he couldn't get it done. Now he goes up against better coaching, more traveling. Talk to me about him personally, and then ultimately, would you bet on Oregon to make the playoffs, or would you bet against it?
That's questionable. I mean, they have a difficult schedule. They do get Ohio State at home, which is nice, and they do get Washington at home, which is also nice, but they do have to travel to Michigan. And so I think they lose 2 games. It's questionable. I
And
think
what
they
about him as a coach? Are you, what would be your thoughts on him?
on Lanning, I think he's a great recruiter. I think he's a very solid coach too. He's still growing into it, but I do think Lanning knows what he's doing, and he just needs a little bit more experience to really get over the hump. But that Oregon roster is extremely talented, and they picked up Dylan Gabriel out of Oklahoma as their quarterback, and
And
so
is he
they
similar to Bo Nick? Will they run the same type of offense?
yeah, he's a lefty, but he can create outside the pocket, has a great arm, very accurate, doesn't make poor decisions, which is exactly what Bo Nix did. So
And Washington and USC are both in the Big Ten as well.
yes. USC has a young kid who threw for 6 touchdowns in the bowl game last year named Miller Moss,
Right.
but Lincoln Riley doesn't know how to make a defense. So I'll be looking at a lot of point totals in the games that USC is playing, and they're going to be a fun team to watch, but I don't see them competing with the top dogs this year.
In Washington, they lose everybody, including the coach. Do they rebuild? Are they able to be competitive? Nobody has them as any sort of threat to be, at the top of the Big Ten. Do you see something different?
Kind of the same. I'm pretty sure they picked up Will Rogers, the old Mississippi State quarterback. Pretty sure he's at Washington now. And like he can sling the ball. Like he's a pretty good quarterback. They ran the air raid down there at Mississippi State, and that kind of fits that Washington MO. So, but losing your coach, losing everybody, they will take a big step back this year.
So and last but not least, Michigan. So, or excuse me, we didn't really do Ohio State either. So we started with Oregon. Talk to me. Let's go Ohio State and Michigan. I know Ohio State's got. I mean, does Ohio State have considered the best roster in the whole country? Right? Ohio State or Georgia?
Yeah, they're the second betting favorite behind Georgia currently. I don't really trust their quarterback or their coach. And maybe that's just a hunch, but Ryan Day has not proven to been able to get over the hump. I mean, he's lost to Michigan like 3 years in a row.
I don't like
And
him.
Will Howard, good quarterback at Kansas State, but playing in Columbus is so much different than playing in Manhattan.
I
So
like McCord. I thought McCord wasn't really a problem. I thought their defense couldn't stop the run last year. McCord was not terrible.
yeah, and they have the highest rated defense this year in college football preseason, which will be interesting. So that helps. Also picking up Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, they're just going to be able to run it down some teams' throats. But when you play a team like Michigan, that doesn't work all the time because Michigan's front seven on defense and their O line are so good in the trenches, they will beat you up. And so I think Ohio State will struggle with that.
And where are we at with Michigan?
Pretty sure they're starting Orgy this year, and so they'll be a pretty run the ball heavy team. They got Donovan Edwards back, which is nice. Great O line again. Going to be in the trenches. I'm going to be looking at point totals also for Michigan, likely on the underside of that. I see a lot of 21-3 games.
Right.
And
And where and
sure.
I was gonna say when you're betting on these games, I talked about it the other day. If you're betting futures, you're doing it because you're confident in what the team's gonna look like. So whether you're betting the under or the over, like for me, you look at Michigan and it's almost impossible to figure out what they're gonna look like because McCarthy couldn't run, and this kid Orgy is extremely fast. He can run. Hard to know exactly what Michigan's gonna look like. Rather see them play. And it's the case in most of college football. So I'll be curious to hear what your bets are when we're finished. But all right, you got 4 teams in the SEC. You locked in Georgia and Missouri. Let's do the same for the Big Ten. Who would you lock in, and then how many teams do you think ultimately get in?
I think they get two. I think it is
Only two?
Ohio State. I think it's Ohio State and Oregon.
Ohio State, Oregon wouldn't shock you necessarily if Michigan or Penn State got in. Is there a team? Is there another team that might be a dark horse that you like their value that we didn't talk about? Whether it's Maryland, Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan State, one of those.
I don't mind Iowa. Iowa, I mean, extreme dark horse. They would be the 12, likely, is probably how that would work out. 11 or 12 is where they would end up. But I don't see them beating out a two-loss Missouri team
So
unless they unless they go 11-1. But I mean, a two-loss SEC team is going to get in pretty much.
and,
Period.
and then just and when you say like beaten out, we're talking. It's still voting at the end of the day. Even though they extended to 12 teams, it's still going to be the committee. It's still going to be the same type of process, except there'll be a big argument over 10, 11, and 12 instead of the Florida State Alabama argument last year. All right, let's do. Well, I said Florida State. Let's do ACC. So we got 6 teams so far. Really have 7 because you have to have that one other team, and we'll keep that towards the end. So now that would be 2 with the ACC, and then 3 with the Big 12, 3 with the ACC, 2 with the Big 12, one or the other. Let's talk to me about the ACC. It's Miami, Clemson, and I know we've talked about this before. It's Miami, Clemson, and Florida State as who everybody's talking about. But you like a different team. You think there's another team that has a lot of value. So go ahead.
Yeah. So Florida State, DJU Younglele, transfer obviously transferred from Clemson to Oregon State and then back to Florida State, which he is a very well-traveled man, we'll put it that way. But I like them. I think they're the favorite to win. I do think they get in. I think they get in. Even if they don't win the ACC, I do think they get in. In terms of the others, Clemson is a big question mark and has been for multiple years now. Really, since Younglele started for them that first year after I can't remember who their quarterback was before him,
It was
but
Lawrence, right?
yeah, I think it was Lawrence.
Yeah.
But when he came in, everything kind of just fell apart, and they haven't been able to recover since Dabo has started recruiting. So they're kind of a question mark. Potentially 10-2, they'll have a shot. But I mean, again, all these other conferences, these teams are hoping to be at that level, and I don't know if they can resume to resume. I don't think they can compare with an SEC team. And I'm just going to keep repeating that over and over again because these SEC teams play such a gauntlet
What's the
versus you
team?
get to go play Boston College. That's an off week for these teams.
And I was gonna say, what's the team you like in the ACC though?
So I've got two, and they're both will be on my bets here. And I have Virginia Tech and SMU both over 8.5 wins. Those are two that I kind of touched on. Both returned stud quarterbacks, Preston Stone for SMU and Kyron Drones for Virginia Tech. Keep an eye out for him. He's a dark horse, can run the ball, can throw the ball. They have a dynamic offense, and going up to Blacksburg to play is very, very difficult.
I
So
was gonna say, so that's your team. Virginia Tech is like, excuse me, when I was, I don't know, it seemed like forever they would play the same type of football. Special teams, defense, other teams would screw up. They'd always play it Thursday night or Saturday morning. And then they just have had a drop off. They haven't really had an identity. You're saying now the offense is going to be the thing for Virginia Tech?
yeah, well, I mean, if you remember, Tyrod Taylor went there, Michael Vick went there. That's their MO. Are these running quarterbacks, and Drones is set to jet to follow their lead. And just like looking at their schedule here, they don't play too difficult of a schedule. They got Marshall, Old Dominion, Rutgers, who we'll get to later. And then they go to Miami, September 27th. They go to Miami, and that'll be a good game. But then you don't play another ranked team until you get Clemson at home. And so there's a very good chance that they're a one-loss team when then they play Clemson at home. And
Give,
that's going to be a crazy game.
give me so I feel like I have an opinion on Ugugule. Is that how you say his name?
You young Galilei, yeah, yeah.
Not a fan. I'll be interested. I think Florida State, if there was a spot for him, it was Florida State because they'll run the football. Norvell's a great coach. He rebuilt that Memphis team. They were fun to watch. So I think he's a great coach. I don't like him. I think, like you said, maybe Florida State gets in. I wouldn't trust them in the playoff. Talk to me about the Klubnik guy. I didn't watch too much of him from Clemson. I think people want to be bullish on Clemson because it feels like they have a great roster. Dabo, you either like it or you love it. It's a very stubborn approach. He doesn't want to do the transfer. Like that's just his thing. I could see myself doing that. Like honestly, if I won the national championship, I could be like, listen, if you don't want to play Clemson, then fuck it. I don't want to. I don't want to go recruit the guy from Miami or Alabama who whined and now he wants to transfer to Clemson. However, that's the way the world's working. So Clemson is kind of running their own program. I think most people in college football, like not fans, like officials and fellow coaches root against Clemson because they're trying to do it a different way. What do you make of their recruiting style, or excuse me, their lack of, going after the transfer portal? And then give me an analysis on Klubnik. What kind of quarterback is he? Does he have a potential? Let's dive a little deeper into him.
Yeah, he's more of a pro style guy. Kind of sits in the pocket, can kind of create outside the pocket, runs when he needs to, definitely capable of running when he needs to. He just lacks the maturity a little bit. And if he takes a step forward this year, then the ACC is kind of theirs.
What do you think of their way he's recruiting? Like, do you think it ultimately pays off? Are the guys closer knit? Like, what do you think? I mean, you're closer in age to them. This whole transfer, I think it's awkward when guys transfer schools, or is everybody just kind of used to it at this point? It doesn't really matter. Do you think there's an edge? How would you rate his style?
Personally, I think Clemson's just a weird school in general, and Dabo fits it to a T. The school environment in itself, Dabo embodies that so much. And so it's an acquired taste to go to, but they always have good culture. They've always had great culture, but their talent is not where it was. Like they don't have any more there's no more Deshaun Watsons. There's no more Trevor Lawrences, no more Travis Etienne's, DeAndre Hopkins, Taj Boyd. Those guys are gone. I mean, they did have Will Shipley last year, and he was decent. But yeah, like they're just not where they were talent wise before.
So, and where are we at with Miami? Everybody wants to put Miami in there. What that coach did last year, Cristobal, blowing the game at the end. He's a great recruiter. Ultimately, do you think Miami gets into the playoff?
Uh, they're all, I mean, so many of these teams is quarterback play. Cameron Ward's the transfer there, from Washington
He was
State.
the number one guy, right?
Yeah, he was he might have been the number one QB in the transfer portal. He is a stud, but again, like they kind of have an identity problem. They have an identity crisis. They don't know who they want to be. They're not the thugs of the early 2000s Miami teams, like, but I think they're trying to embody that a little bit too much. And so if Cristobal can rally the troops and Cameron Ward plays well, they'll be right in the conversation.
Big 12. Let's go. Let's finish up with the Big 12. Utah, do you have them winning it? I mean, to remind people, the Big 12 has turned into, well, kind of feel like the Pac 12 a little bit with Arizona State in there. Colorado's back in there. BYU's in there. God, then they got some weird teams like UCF's in there. It's a weird situation there in the Big 12. They still got Texas Tech. Talk to me about the Big 12. What do you see this year?
Yeah, Big 12 is just the Wild West this year. It's just going to eat itself alive, and it's going to be so, so fun to watch. My pick is Oklahoma State. This is one of my other picks. Value is really good. I think they're plus 700, 750. And I really like that
In the
value.
Big 12?
Yeah, Oklahoma State to win the Big 12. I think that there's a lot of value there because I see them on the same level as Utah. And realistically, it's Utah, Kansas State. Kansas State's starting a young rookie style quarterback named Avery Johnson, who like has the makings to be a star, but he hasn't played. He played in a bowl game and then like cleanup duty after Will Howard came out. So he's a bit of a question mark, but both of those teams are in the plus 300 to plus 400 range. Oklahoma State returns their whole offensive line, the best running back in the country. Alan Bowman is a stud. They have a great defense. They should be right up there. And so seeing them at plus 750, I just am like seeing dollar signs in my eyes. Like you can hedge out of that pretty easy if you need to.
Right. I was going to say that sounds like as long as they make the Big 12. So a lot of these bets from a hedge perspective, right? If they make the conference championship, then you're automatically golden. So like a Georgia, you might be better off taking them to win the SEC championship. That way you can just hedge against them, and take whoever they're playing. And if you think Oklahoma State's going to get there at plus 750, I mean, Christ, they'll at best they'll be like a pick'em game, or they could be a big favorite if there's somebody from the Big 12 that's unexpected, but they won't be the underdog unless it's like 2 or 3 points against Utah. Do you see both Oklahoma State and Utah making the final 12 or the playoff? And what about Kansas State?
They could. I wouldn't be surprised if they got 3 teams in. I would not be surprised, but like we're getting to the point where we're going to get to about an 11 teams that I have kind of guaranteed that I think, and then there's going to be one spot left for 5 or 6 teams to compete for and kind of see how that plays out. Jumping back to Oklahoma State here, they get Utah at home and Kansas State on the road, but other than that, they play the bottom dwellers of the Big 12. They get Arizona State, they get Colorado, who's we'll see, but they get Colorado, Texas Tech, Baylor, both terrible teams. And like and then they play TCU in Fort Worth, which will be an interesting game, and they play BYU. Like all of those teams I just named there are non-factors. They don't have to play Arizona, they don't have to play Kansas, which are kind of that tier 2 level teams. They don't have a very hard schedule. And so for them to be a 2-loss team and win and get in a win and get in situation against, say, a 11-1 Utah team. Utah goes 11-1, Oklahoma State goes 10-2. They're in a win and get in. You win, you're in. You lose, you're not.
So let's wrap it up. Appreciate you going through all those, and then this is what we'll post in case people don't listen to the whole pod. You said you had 7 bets that you're comfortable putting money on before the season starts. So let's go. We probably touched on a couple of them. So start with the first one.
Yeah, so first one, obviously mentioned it before, Missouri to make the playoff plus 180. And it really just comes down to returning their 2 best players, and Drinkwitz, the coach, like proved himself to be a winner last year. They returned Brady Cook at quarterback and Luther Burden, who's a top 10 pick. That's pretty much enough said there.
Second one.
Virginia Tech, over 8.5 wins. Those odds I had at plus 105. And again, just comes back to Kyron Drones, and Virginia Tech's kind of a sleeping giant. It's used to be kind of a powerhouse, national championship contenders year in and year out. And Blacksburg is not an easy place to play. And so those home games, especially that one against Clemson, I have circled on my calendar. That's going to be a crazy game.
Third bet.
SMU over 8.5. Same thing. Not really a difficult schedule. They dodge a lot of the big dogs of the ACC, and I see them getting over that 8.5 hump really quick, especially with Preston Stone coming back at quarterback.
Number 4.
Liberty over 10.5 minus 125. And that comes down to they do not play a Power 4 team.
And they would have been the team last year that would have made, the tournament, correct?
Correct. And they return their quarterback, Slater, too, or Sloter. Yeah.
So 10.5, they play 11 games, I'm assuming?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure they play 12. Let me double check here. But I'm pretty sure they play 12, which means that they can drop one.
So you got Liberty over 10.5, SMU over 8.5, Virginia Tech over 8.5, Missouri plus 180 to make the playoffs. What is number 5?
I actually have Rutgers over 6.5 wins. That is minus 1. Rutgers over 6. Rutgers over 6 minus 135. And the reason I like that is pretty much the same thing. This all comes down to scheduling. Rutgers is a decent team. They weren't terrible last year. They won't be terrible this year, but they play such an easy schedule. They dodge all of those automatic losses this year. Like they dodge all of those big dogs, the leader of the pack. Yeah, they dodge all of them. They don't play any of them. And so
you got Rutgers over 6 wins at minus 135.
Yes.
Perfect. And you got 2 more. Number 6.
Yeah. Notre Dame under 10 wins. And that might catch a couple people off guard here, but I just don't see anything with them. I think they're ranked 7. It's like there's some stat that says every year there's a top 10 team that doesn't end up in the top 25. And because they're ranked 7 right now, I don't think they finish in the top 25. They go at Texas A&M August 31st. That's a loss in my book. And then they play at Purdue, they play at Georgia Tech, they get Louisville at home. But I mean, those are all tough games. And then they play Florida State and USC this year as well. So I don't really see them doing any better than 8-4, 9-3. I think if they go 9-3, that's a win. Their quarterback's the Duke transfer, but I mean, he showed up against Clemson last year, and otherwise he was just kind of meh, in my opinion. So I don't think that they get to that 10-win mark.
And your last one.
Oklahoma State, Big 12 champ at plus 750, which we just touched on, but I think it's kind of a three-horse race there in the Big 12, and the value with Oklahoma State is very much there at plus 750.
Sweet. Alrighty. Well, I'll go. Let's see. I will take my life savings divided by 7. Put now. Okay. Jack, appreciate it. Just so everybody knows and what we're planning on doing, Jack's more than welcome to jump into any pod anytime something comes up. The more we see him, the better. But at a minimum, we're going to have our show come out on Friday, sometime in the morning, afternoon, to talk about the Saturday games. Well, there's always a handful of Friday night games as well. So we'll probably touch on that and then go over the slate for Saturday. As far as picks, talk to us about your picks. I know we only have a minute or two left, but I'll let you run. Some of your picks you'll have out early in the week, like, and that's why we have Telegram. Some of them you'll have an hour before they start on Saturday, right? Like, it just kind of depends on your life and the information that's coming in. Is that an accurate way of saying it?
Yeah, that is. I mean, they might be a little sporadic. I'm going to check the lines as soon as they come out week before. And if there's something that immediately is glaring to me, I will be sending that in immediately because there's a lot of value with line shopping and getting the right spread at the right time with college football.
Yeah, I was
Because
gonna
you're
say because you get so much not like smart money, but just like people love betting college football because they went to that school and whatever, and they'll just bet a ton of money on the games, especially if it's a big game. So if you can jump on the line, and yeah, that's why we have Telegram set up the way it is. I told Jack when I first brought him on board, I don't want him sending like 8 messages on Saturday, but at the same time, I get it. Sometimes you might decide on a game later in the night, and you might send out 3 different messages. I think that's why we're doing Telegram because it's easier that way instead of the emails. But all right, Jack, I'm gonna let you run because I kept you 5 minutes later than I said I was. I know your schedule's busy. Appreciate you, but yeah, and we'll also talk NFL a little bit. Obviously, you'll have picks for NFL as well, but the primary conversation points each week are going to be about college football. Give us your perspective, some things to look at. So I will see you next week. College football, I guess, pretty much starts next Saturday. We'll have 3 or 4 games, see if there's something that you like, and then we'll officially get rolling the following week. And yeah, anything else, or are we good?
no, that's it.
Sweet, man. Well, have a great day. Appreciate you guys. Yeah, and then sorry the pod came out later. I knew Jack and I were gonna record, so pod's coming out. Picks for the Padres. Padres are in Colorado. Any inside information here before I go? Because I've been following the Padres. Just bet the over in Coors. Is that the inside information?
That tends to work a lot of the time. So I would not say no to that. The Rockies are terrible, terrible pitching. So stay away from that side of the ball if you can.
Yeah, don't bet the under team total against the Rockies and Coors. All right,
Never.
I'll see you next week, man. Everybody have a good night, and hopefully the Orioles get things rolling here, keep things rolling, I should say. All right, see you guys. As I find the button.